how am I rehearsing to ultimately live at the level of performance with which I want to be at. And this is something that I've seen us really consider within the musical setting, because we used to rehearse collaboratively in sync with one another, standing right beside each other. And more than ever, we are alone when we are rehearsing. And that has had a huge effect on us. Welcome to the Choir Baton, a podcast designed to engage with people and stories, ideas, and inspirations stemming from choir. No other art form, no sport, no hobby, no business requires a group of people to execute a communal goal with just their voices. Join me, your host, Beth Philemon, as I interview guests who are singers, teacher conductors, instrumentalists, and community members. Together, we'll ask questions, seek understanding, and share insight from our experiences in life and in choir. Hey, Choir Baton, and welcome to the Choir Baton podcast, the first Choir Baton podcast of 2021. And it's unbelievable to say that at this point, the Choir Baton podcast has been around for 2 years. 2 years. I still distinctly remember when I was getting ready to release the first episodes 2 years ago, where I was in my life, where I was in my dreams and visions, and in some ways they're very similar, and in some ways they also feel very different because I feel like such a different person. Since I started doing the podcast, I have learned so much musically, personally, emotionally, leadershiply, all the things. And I want to first and foremost say, whatever is placed upon your heart as something you want to do this year, I say go for it. Let this example of the Choir Baton podcast be proof that going after your dreams can be so rewarding and so fulfilling. I'm really excited for this year's guests. We've really gotten into an amazing rhythm of, well, we're getting into an even better rhythm of how we are going to be sharing the Choir Baton podcast with you. What's really fascinating also is that I could not be doing this without the help of my friend, but also my former student, Maggie Hemedinger. And Maggie has just been a godsend in getting the podcast episodes done. One of the things that I think is really hard for us as choir directors is to outsource, but we also know that better things can happen when we outsource because we are giving up a level of control. And that is in a sense of what this podcast, like different essence and elements of this is when you quote unquote give up control. I used air quotes there if you're not watching this. If you give up control of even just like the simple production and execution. And Maggie has been such a huge blessing in that. I could not do this without her because of the current crazy schedule that I'm in. I wanted to spend today's podcast episode talking to you about this concept of revamping. And that is the title of a new course that I have released with the Choir Baton. And I'm excited to share with you the tenets of that. If you are already taking the course, you're going to hear some of the same information, but in a totally different way. And if you're interested in the course, this is going to be a great way to share with you what it's all about and what it's all in there. And it also is this culmination, I feel like, of the last 2 years of my work with Choir Baton, as I've moved it from just a collaborative Instagram account to something where we have podcast guests and are putting ourselves out there into the community, till now, about a year ago, actually having an online membership and having courses and figuring all of that out. And it has been this concept of continual revamping. to revamp is to make something new or improved, to gradually seek to make something better. And I think that that is what we do as musicians. I love the phrase revamped, and I have to credit my friend Emily Campbell. When I was trying to come up with the course for Revamped, the course name, I plan by taking computer sheets of paper and different colored Sharpie markers, and I just write and organize and things like that out that way. And I was reading off all these different names to her, and I was like, it just doesn't fit. And I can't figure out what exactly I want it to be called. I want it to be a course for teachers to help them plan, whether it is amidst COVID or not, because I think we need that in our choral realm. My friend Ann Molesky with Anna Krusik does a big stuff with planning that's geared towards elementary educators. You should go check that out. And I also know Victoria Bowler has a planning binder, which is kind of like a mix of the teaching membership and of Ann's planning stuff, because it is curriculum for elementary singers and students, teachers to do. And hers are a bit more planned out. But I was like, this is new and different. And I just really feel like we need something, because in our current climate, choral educators more than ever have to be very succinct with their plans. And I know from personal experience and from my friends' experience, we are oftentimes like the worst when it comes to writing out plans. And I have processes that I've built in, but I wanted to share them to be able to help others, and also make sure that they were relevant, to update them, to formalize it a bit more, so it wasn't just something that worked for Beth, but something that worked for everyone in a choir situation. And so I was going through all this, talking with Emily, and Emily goes, well, what about revamped? And I was like, that's it. I love it, because it has the musical connotation of vamping, right? And if you have been in any sort of like popular music section or setting, popular music setting, or oftentimes in like a praise and worship music setting, I know especially in Black churches, all of those type of settings have opportunities for vamping. And we know that in music, like it's in that vamping section where the beauty can like really occur within the music, right? New riffs are tried, maybe new chord progressions are added in. If you are a jazzer, right, like that is where the unique things happen that you almost even can't replicate, but they're so beautiful. It's where the magic happens. But then if we're also like classically trained and we like to go by the hymnal, or we, don't want to stray off of the ink on the page, sometimes this concept of vamping is terrifying for us. And I feel like many of us feel that way when we are in a traditional choral music setting, and that we like to follow the ink on the page, and we don't necessarily feel comfortable with vamping and making it up from the page. We don't do a ton of improvisation, or as much as we could or should. I think we're doing more with it now, but still, all of these different things. And so I love the juxtaposition, right, of this concept of vamping, that in certain musical settings like those that I just mentioned, like vamping is very cool. Vamping is unique. It adds to the music. It brings something out new in the music. And yet also, if you are looking for something that's a bit more by the book, that's actually how we all teach when it comes to handing scores out and going by reading what's there. And the concept of vamping is a little bit scary for us. So I loved that mix, and I thought there is something really here, because if there has ever been a year where musicians in the world have had to vamp and now revamp what and how and why they do, this is the year in which they have done it. And I know that because I've personally experienced that. I have watched you all experience it, and it has been crazy. So I want to spend today reflecting on 2020 from a musical standpoint, lessons that have been learned, but also in how it ties to the course that we're offering. You don't have to purchase the course to get anything out of this, but if you are liking some of these frameworks, I totally encourage you to go check it out on the website. There will be a link at the bottom for you to do, but it's there for you if you want or need it. But then this will also provide frameworks for you too. So grab a pen, pencil, an Apple Pencil if you're like me and my newest obsession, an Apple Pencil, and take down notes. And let's jump in. So this concept of revamping that I talk about in the course is divided into 4 sections. And the first section has kind of like 2 parts. And we talk about a time strategy thing, but we also talk about a personal strategy as well. And that personal strategy is knowing your why, because your why is so important. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to forget the growth in our why as well. And I've really experienced that personal growth this year because this is my first year that I have never not been in a consistent musical setting. When I left the classroom in May of 2019, I started a community choir that fall, 6-week sing, which was designed to engage community singers in 6 weeks of rehearsals, followed by a culminating performance at the end. And I had a co-conductor. It was awesome. It was one of my favorite musical experiences. We had also a big Christmas bar sing that December, etc. A lot of really cool opportunities for me to still be engaged in music making, even with Choir Baton. Fast forward to spring of 2020, we had started our next 6-week sing, and that was going really, really well. And then COVID hit smack dab in the middle of it, and we kept delaying it some, and then just basically had to cancel, like so many other events, right? And that really led me back to the why of choral music, because for the first time ever, I went from mid-February to even still current day, where I have not gotten in front of a choir in any capacity and used my hands to make music with them. I have been very fortunate to have voice lessons and piano lessons that I've done. I continue to make videos for Choir Baton on, through the computer. Plenty of conversations about choral music, but this is the longest span of time that I've ever gone without standing in front of a choir and making music. I also had a long-term sub position that I took back in the spring because I'm a crazy person, and also it was for my friend, and I wanted to help her out. But doing all of that, and I wanted to just absorb the fact that I missed it. I felt at the beginning of everything, when people were really mourning, missing making music in person, I had mentally prepared myself for the fact that I wasn't going to have that because I wasn't in the classroom every day, because I'm in grad school not studying music. So I think I had been mentally prepared to not deal with music every single day. But the juxtaposition of that being the farther and farther we got along into the shutdown of the world, the greater realization that there was a longer period of time that I'd had where I had made music with people. I found unique ways. My dear friend Derek King and I, at the beginning of this, actually I went over to his house, and we sat on his piano together and just played and sang. And it was so moving. I hadn't made music with another human face to face in so long that it was just incredibly meaningful. I started when I was really only seeing my immediate family for a long time, and I started making them sing with me and do different things and posting videos about that. And they got to the point where they're like, oh my gosh. But even on Christmas, I posted a video with the family singing, because that was my only outlet. And it really leans back to my why, because I continue to understand the gravity with which we get to be a part of as choral musicians. As a conductor, I appreciate and understand so much more the power of being able to be in a room with people, and to be able, for me, I'm able to see, but I firmly believe and know from other friends I have that are choral conductors and musicians that do not have sight, or have limited vision, or on some spectrum of vision. awareness that, you can and feel it up. So I'm not saying only strictly see, but the power that comes from being able to do that. And not many people get to do that, because the other crazy weird juxtaposition of my life has been, I am in a corporate setting now every single day. I started an internship at a global company in May, and I knew all of those people, not through choral music. It has also been the longest period of my life where I have not been in direct involvement with people through choir. And that has caused me to think through so much, and again, lean back to my why and draw parallels and connections, because I firmly believe that what I'm doing in that position is incredibly tied to what I do as a choral conductor. But finding those connections and what they mean and how they mean and all the things has been really unique and really special. So it's reminded me of my why, and the why being that I love helping folks and drawing connections for them to help them and to help them help each other, making unique things, and being able to look at someone and see what they need without them even having to ask for it because you were watching, or being able to give some sort of feedback without also having to say anything, because you know that by the shape of your hand, if you're in a conducting gesture or in a business setting, maybe it's even just an email or a reflection, something like that. Like, watching that cadence has been something that has reminded me of how much I love choral music. But I also love choral music because in that context, the music is the conduit and the actions, again, are helping others. Within that module 1 of Revamped and talking about the why, I also link it to 2 timing strategies. I've probably never been busier in my life, and quite frankly, when I look back at 2020, where I'm sitting right now is quite literally where I've been the majority of the year at this desk. I did get a standing desk because I was fortunate to be able to get one in the beginning of the summer, but literally at a desk is where I've spent the majority of this year. And within that, I have juggled a ton of things, and I have by no means perfected, but I've really begun to lean into 2 time strategies to getting things done. And that being this concept of batching and this other system, right, of time blocking. And time blocking being only allowing yourself set periods of time to accomplish the 20 things that you have to do on your to-do list today. Now, unbeknownst to me, this is how my high school choral teacher, who I had on the podcast several weeks ago, this is how she planned her end of the semester dress rehearsals with all the choirs and all the kids. She had this, and this to accomplish within X amount of periods, and then we moved on to the next, and then we moved on to the next. When I was, and now, even when I still am leading rehearsals where I'm incredibly time bound to complete a series of things, that is an approach I still use. Well, this year I have learned to take even those rehearsal strategies, and there's strategies that a favorite blogger of mine used and told, not me about, told all of her followers about, but we'll say we're on a first name basis, right? That she told me about. And that is, when you feel overwhelmed and you have so many things to do, allot certain amounts of time for it. And this is an incredible strategy that has enabled me to do a lot. And I think that it's something that we can utilize, especially in the choral music rehearsal setting, whether it's an actual rehearsal or whether it's a planning period that you are knocking out all the things that you need to do. You're only giving yourself 10 minutes to answer as many emails as you can before you move on, and you leave it and you begin working on a permission slip, or you are allowing yourself 10 minutes to look for this, or so on and so forth. But then the reciprocal of that is batching. And batching is something, especially with Choir Baton stuff, Maggie and I, and those working with us, are working to really make sure that we're doing a great job of it, because it enables more synergy when you are creating things instead of doing like one single thing all the time. A great analogy for batching is those of you that took like piano lessons or voice lessons in college, right? But batching is the exact opposite of what you don't want to do in a lesson setting, but it's what we all did. It's essentially like where you sit down and you give yourself 3 hours to learn an entire song before your voice lesson the next day. That's a horrible example of batching, and where you should not use batching. But batching is where it's instead of a time-based approach, it's a goal-based approach, right? So you have 10 songs you have to learn. It's maybe not sitting down and learning all 10 within this day, but it's maybe learning all of the rhythms in 5 of the pieces and going through and working on IPA of the text of the other 5, right? And so you are giving yourself a block, or excuse me, not a block of time, but like you are batching and doing all of that in one setting. Now, I don't also necessarily ascribe to doing that and when it comes to music in that type of setting exactly, but instead of thinking of when you are passing out papers, you're not passing out papers every single day in a rehearsal. Maybe Mondays are your passing out your paper days, Tuesdays are your collecting days, etc. There are batching strategies that, especially with this online, hybrid, non-hybrid thing that we have going on in our classrooms, that we can really utilize batching in order to be very effective. We are working towards, we are not there yet, but batching a series of podcasts at one setting where we record them all in one setting, then we edit them all next, and then we work on where they're going to be posted on YouTube, where they're going to be posted on the place that sends them out into the podcast world, posting them on the blog, doing that all in chunks so that it's a bit more like Industrial Revolution, where they have the assembly lines. It's assembly line-esque. Again, it's not great for everything, but it is finding when and where it's appropriate for and utilizing that to maximize your time. And so when I look at 2020, that is something that I really used to make sure that I was making the most use of my time. I admittedly, knowing that it was going to be a year of no change really for me other than my internship, I committed myself to the fact that I was just going to be working my tail off. I don't even want to tell you what my hours a day in front of a computer were. I'm sure yours were very similar, especially since most everyone has gone to all virtual at one point in time. But again, thinking through those kinds of concepts. So then when we have talked about time blocking and also looking at our why, 2 other concepts to talk about within the course Revamp. And the first one being, what is the process for which you prepare music? And I think this is incredibly relevant for us to all continue to think about and reconsider, is how and why do you say something is like started and done within a classroom setting? So for example, we oftentimes have lived under the adage of like, we pick music, we perform music, we pick music, we perform music. And now that our performances look so very different, what does it mean to perform music? Is it an online virtual choir? Is it a portfolio or something like that, right? What is this performance aspect of music that you are looking for? And so what I did within the course is I broke it down, still within the traditional setting of what the process looks like as we plan for any period of time, being you pick the repertoire, teach the repertoire, rehearse the repertoire, perform the repertoire, and thinking about what are concepts to consider when you are picking music, what are concepts you are considering when you are teaching music, what are concepts to consider when you are rehearsing music and thus performing music. And within the picking of music, right, we see so many parallels within the work that we have realized we still have such a greater amount to do, particularly in regards to Black Lives Matter and making sure that we are honoring the voices and the work of our Black colleagues, our Black musicians that are around us, whether they are those writing the music, conducting the music, or they're even the singers of color that are around us every single day. What kind of music are we looking for that honors them? Similarly, within music that represents women and that represents people LGBTQIA plus that identify as someone within that category. I don't know if category is the right word to say, but someone that identifies under that family or, a type of umbrella. And so that is something that I've always sought to be mindful of as a conductor, making sure that the music that I'm picking is representative, and that if I am in front of an all-white choir, also being able to consider, like, why is the choir all white? And I'm not saying you need to pull people of color in just to like check off a box, but it's made me consider greater how and what does diverse music look like, and how are we continuing to approach learning about people that don't look like us and that don't sound like us, and what that means on a broad spectrum. 2020 has taught us that, again, we have so much more work to do. I think another example in which I've struggled with that this year has been, quite frankly, through the song of Jingle Bells. I've always loved the song of Jingle Bells. I think it's fun. I think it's easy. But this year has shown us that and I think Miss Duncan is her name on Instagram. I was very, very, very impressed with a blog that she wrote about it and her own reckoning as to the fact that the roots of Jingle Bells do not support people of color, and how are we as musicians going to channel that, and are we going to accept that? Yes or no? I think if anything, it's a greater call to action for us to understand the music that we are teaching and studying and learning, and why, and what it means. And we've seen that also within the composers that write incredibly pompous and poor me, my white maleness. Luckily his name has completely escaped me, so I'm not even having to think about it right now. Daniel Elder. But we see that within composers of music that we have potentially programmed before. And how are we going to balance that as musicians and programming people's music like that? Why and why not? And how are we going to engage in these conversations? In my own personal life, I come from a very conservative family and have had a lot of really tough conversations with my parents, with people that I grew up with on Facebook. I've also had conversations with people on Instagram that I thought we would be coming from a similar side in regards to the importance of women and how we are representing women in choral music education and music education in general. And conversations that did not go like I thought they were going to go. But it's all coming back to thinking about who are we picking to associate ourselves with, just as much as we are picking the repertoire that we are associating with as well. And that is something that I've had to learn in my own personal life. I still am learning, right? We're always learning that, but I think 2020 has really opened our eyes to that in particular. And then it comes into, once we pick music, right, it's how are we going to teach it? And I am a big believer in being very intentional with what you're teaching and why and how you approach it. And in the course, I talk about, you want to make sure that at some level you pick a song to teach from this point, and then in another you pick it from this point, and you don't have to approach learning every single song in the same way. And for me, that has been something that I have lived in my own life within 2022. I have learned to approach things completely differently than I might have. Oftentimes that is a bit more wary because I have a tendency to just jump in and do, and instead listening to my gut when I potentially need to step back and really consider if that is the approach that I need to take. Also thinking about how and why I am learning certain things, and also, how am I going to learn and teach it in different ways? And getting the feedback from that as well is something that I am still really struggling with. I think the irony being in my new life that I am beginning, and I don't mean new life as in like brand new life, but like the next page that I'm turning, is working full time for a data company. I didn't even know who they were like 2 years ago, right? But literally what we do at the company is we help other companies know where, when, how, why to store their data so that they can access it when they need to access it. And I'm very nerdy about it. It's incredibly fascinating to me because we get to work with so many different what we would in the business would call like verticals, right? So in a sense, a musical comparison would be genres, right? You get to work with so many genres. In this context, you get to work with so many different verticals, from healthcare to the gaming industry to banking, education, government, so on and so forth. And within that setting, we are having to figure out what data goes when and where and why, and teaching customers that, teaching employees that, but then also getting feedback from them to know what's working and what isn't. And more than ever in 2020, the ways in which we have gotten feedback to tell us how we are doing within educating folks around us is vastly different. And this is something that I am still needing to get better at, even as someone over the Choir Baton teaching membership and different things like that. What kind of feedback am I looking for and drawing on so that I know what next steps to take? And that is an important thing that we have to consider when we are teaching music. Moving on from music is the rehearsing of music, right? So again, how are we living day to day in life? Well, for me, and how I'm living day to day in life has been totally different. I work from home now, and I do school at night, and I make music in between. And for me and my family, my nephew is here during the day, and my schedule is very different and very similar all at the same time. But how am I rehearsing to ultimately like live at the level of performance with which I want to be at? And this is something that I've seen us really consider within the musical setting, because we used to rehearse collaboratively in sync with one another, standing right beside each other. And more than ever, we are alone when we are rehearsing. And that has had a huge effect on us. I think some of it has been really positive. Some singers I know have been able to really listen and grow and determine within their voice how they are growing and making changes and making, hearing unique things that they perhaps didn't hear before, versus now they sometimes students are also not even in a place to where they can individually record, to where they can actually rehearse, or they struggle with the personal motivation to rehearse without the collectiveness of people around them. And I think we see the parallels between how that has manifested itself in a rehearsal setting to how it's also manifested itself into our lives. I know I have experienced that as well in 2020, right? How is what I'm doing every day within the confines of my house affected because I'm not getting out and engaging with others? And for me, it's actually this year, probably more than ever, been one of the best things that could have happened for me. But it's not without side effects. It's not without repercussions of lost connections possibly with people, because I have been so in a place to where I've been able to be driven. I'll be very honest, over the winter break, I have struggled to figure out how to like work almost in the day, because it's not like 24/7 within my household, between Zoom calls and a 5-year-old running around and managing kindergarten school and managing, all these other things. And so what does that look like? And it's something that I have, again, felt the repercussions of, because how I've been rehearsing, if you will, has been totally different. And this is something that I think we will continue to see and continue to think about, how we need to revamp what our expectations are for rehearsal in choral settings, not just in this in-between time that we're in right now, between 2020 and 2021, but also how is what we are learning now going to affect our rehearsals in the future? Because this is not something that I think any of us expected to be a way in which we are practicing for so long, but it's not going anywhere for a while either, at least in the United States. And we have to begin to consider what our future rehearsal is going to look like and how are they going to be impacted by this time. And moving into that final process has been the performance. And I think this is something that is so important in our lives as music educators, but also as people, is like, what is it that we want? How do we want to perform? And I don't mean perform as in this like hoity-toity, this is who I am, like, and fakeness of a performance, right? But we do have to get stuff done. And also we can impact the lives of others by sharing and communicating and performing, I guess, if you will, to use that phrase. Like, how does that look like in our daily lives? How can we show up for others and be there for others within the world that we are living in? And I have really, I don't know if, I guess maybe struggled is the right word, but I've really thought about and done a great job and a really bad job of what does it look like for me to be at that optimal performance level, so that I'm not overdoing it, but I'm not underdoing it. And it's something I'm still working on. What does being that at that level of performance look like for me with all of the different things that I'm juggling? And so I pose that to you. What does that look like for you and all of the things that you are juggling as well? And combined with that is, what does a performance look like in a choral setting, right? Is it the virtual choir? Is it a portfolio? Is it a paper? Is it a website? I mean, like, there's so many different things in which I think we have the opportunity to really assess what is a performance, what is the point of it, and then tie that also into the why aspect, as well as we are planning for how we are going to particularly live out and plan for this year. So within Module 3, that's what I talk about in Module 3 of Revamped, is, picking repertoire, teaching repertoire, rehearsing repertoire, performing repertoire, and particularly also in a performance of repertoire, thinking about who is around us, who is our audience, who are we serving, and how can we serve them better through our music. Similarly in life, like, who is around us, who is our audience, who can we serve with them as well. We can then also tie all of that back to our why, and then moments where we feel overwhelmed and not sure where to start or why to start, utilize those timing strategies that we talked about in regards to blocking and time blocking and batching as well. That's Module 3 of Revamped. And then Module 4 of Revamped talks about the actual planning process. And this is something I just kind of sat back and thought about within my own life, and what is effective for me and what I've seen effective in others. And I like threes, so it made sense for it to be a three-pronged approach, but it's also that reciprocal approach. Sometimes we feel like we go round and round in circles out of control. I hope that by thinking in this way, it's more of a controlled circle that you can begin to think of, and that is that within every type of situation, the first thing we want to do is reflect, which is much of like what this podcast episode is a podcast of reflection. And I know probably all of you have spent the last month or so reflecting, and it's reflecting on what is going really poorly and what is going really well, and what needs to be sacrificed and let go of, and what needs to be brought on. And I want to really, really, really encourage you that, it's been awesome to see so many new educators join social media that are talking about music education. Like 5, 6, 7 years ago, when I started posting about choirs on social media and really beginning to talk about it all, people thought I was crazy. Not everyone, right? But especially like Dr. Holder, my graduate school professor at NAU, he was like, why would people like look at choir stuff on social, blah, 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 blah. I don't know if he remembers that. He will probably say that he doesn't, but I think somewhere deep in his core, with all of the other cynical things that he thought about my ideas, that is coupled in there. I kid. I love him dearly. But I say all of that to say is this reflection point, and that is integral to the planning cycle. And then from reflection comes preparation. And that preparation part can take place in several different ways, pulled from the reflection. But after preparation is then execution. And then after execution, you go back to reflection. So it's those 3 points: reflect, prepare, execute, and it goes around in circles. And so I talk about those 3 things within the context of the 4 things that we just talked about, of picking music, teaching music, rehearsing music, performing music, and back around again. And the importance of reflection, the importance of preparation, the importance of execution, but also knowing of those 3, where is the tendency for you to spend the most amount of time in one section and the least amount of time in the other section, and how does that negatively or positively affect the results that you want. My example is I am a big reflector and I am a big executor. I am not a good preparer. I like to, at the university I attend, they have a phrase called think and do, and it like basically sums up who I am. There's no like a glimpse second of like how it's all going to happen. And sometimes that's really, really effective for me. And other times I really face repercussions from that. I have faced repercussions from that this year when we announced the free course on Choir Baton for teaching online. And the way I had the systems messed up, like for the emails and the automations and such, totally like screwed it up. And I started getting like blacklisted, not really being dramatic a bit, right? But being blacklisted, it felt like, on a couple Facebook social media groups, because they were like, oh, it's a scam by How It Takes You To. And I wanted to be like, no, literally it's me here doing this on my dining room table, and I haven't had like a shower in 3 days because I've been working on this and I just haven't thought about it, and it's not a scam. It's like me really wanting to pour my heart and soul into this to help people at this time, and it's all for free. Like that was the context with which I was looking at that from. And if I'd spent a little bit more time like preparing that process before reflecting to executing, maybe that might not have happened. I can think of a webinar that I held where I didn't prepare a couple things like I could have, I should have. And when I got kicked out of the webinar, the only time the entire year out of the 5,000 Zoom calls I've been in on, that was the one time I got kicked out. When I popped back in, like something was happening that I did. It wasn't inappropriate necessarily, like bad, but it was also something that was, in my opinion, didn't fall in line with like collegiality that I long for within Choir Baton interactions. And I could have prepared and set up a couple false saves behind that as well. And so I continue to learn this about myself when I revamp how and why I'm doing everything. Is, okay, I know I love to reflect, I know I love to execute, but because I know my tendencies aren't to look at preparation, I need to make sure that I'm purposely carving out time for preparation. And when I'm struggling with how, when, and why, and where to do that, I can utilize my timing strategies to think about how I'm going to intentionally prepare so the execution is better. And when the execution is better, then my reflections can be better because I have more solid things on which to execute on better. And that is so critical, because that's exactly the risk that we run into as educators. And I think so many of us have spent time, particularly in a secondary choral setting, we are always thinking about that execution and preparation, or for me, it's execution and reflection. And I don't spend like actual time preparing as much as I could have, to where it's like I always have like set lesson plans written down to be able to then like hand out to a student if they are gone. And I think that's where a lot of us have felt the effects of that, because we have not run our classes like that. So now that we are on a part where some students have to rehearse independently, we're having to begin to figure out how to build that preparation in there, both for us and for them, so we're able to all like stay on task. But that is my story. I also can think of other examples of people that they are so leaned in on the preparation aspect, right? That they'll think about it for a little bit before they begin preparing it and then executing it, or maybe any sorts of balances of that. And I think, again, it's so important for us to think about what comes naturally to us, what do we enjoy, and what does not come as naturally to us, what do we potentially avoid, and how can we seek to equalize, not all the time, but equalize those three areas so that we can really be effective in what we are wanting to do. Because this is an opportunity for us to grow yet again through this year. We've learned so much in the year of 2020, and this is an opportunity for us to kind of embrace that. My best friends, Jessica and Chad, they pick words every year that they want to seek to embody. And my word last year was love. And I wanted to do as much as I could in love. And I'll be very honest, there are so many times when I look back at my life last year and what I was able to do, and I was just quite frankly in love with my life, because it had been something that I was able to intentionally build upon and build and be a part of something that I actually I just loved. And it was hard and it wasn't pretty and it was very messy. But again, I think that word threaded itself through. And this year, my goal is to embrace. My goal is to embrace the love and the growth that I've had. I have a lot of changes coming this next year, and that is terrifying and exciting for me. And when I thought about what word I needed to really hone in on, it was the word embrace. So in closing, I wanted to do a little bit of a recap for you within things that I've learned in 2020, and to condense it all within a short amount of time was crazy tricky. But I hope that you enjoyed some of the threads of little stories through this that I've learned. I could talk your ear off on all of the things that I've learned, the people that I've connected with, the way in which this Choir Baton community has grown within 2020 is quite frankly beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm so grateful for the fact that you are a part of this community, and we are going to continue to grow. To our past guests we've had on the podcast, future guests, to those of you that are listening, that send me messages of something that resonated with you, that are, listening in general, it's amazing to see how that has continued to grow. When you share, if something's been meaningful with someone else, that is incredibly powerful. And just so many different aspects with which I am so grateful for. And I look forward to this year of embracing whatever is to come. I wish I could tell you, I think it's going to be a great year. And I in my heart of hearts, I believe that it's going to be another hard year for us. And I say that not to dissuade any feelings of excitement. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that our places are filled with live singing again throughout the month of December and before. But I'm also trying to prepare myself for what that all might mean. But at the same time, embracing what we have right now and the opportunities that are in front of us. And in order to maximize those opportunities, I think it's really important for us to be incredibly intentional with how and why we are vamping during this period, and revamping so we are continuing to grow. It's my hope and desire that this course is something that will help you within that. It's about 2 hours. I really tried to cut it down because I know your time is limited, and each module is aroundish 30 minutes or so, where I talk about each of those 4 things, right? Like your why and time strategies, talking also about the rehearsal process, the process of reflecting, preparing, and executing. And then in the fourth module, connecting it in real world musical examples as to how you can go about that, asking a lot of questions. There is a workbook that goes with it that you can download and utilize as well. Again, just a lot of different tools in there to help you add to your toolbox. One of my favorite things that I talk about in the course, though, is the fact that a great teacher is not a great teacher because of the tools that they have, but it's a great teacher is a great teacher because of the person that they are. You could have every amazing tool in your tool belt, but if you don't know how to use them, or you're using too many of them, or you could have a toolbox of just like one tool, but you don't know the right way to use it, or all these different ways, right? Like the tools are a conduit, or they're a way to help you, but at the end of the day, it's you as the conductor, it's you as the teacher, it's you as the person in the trenches every single day that makes the difference. No matter what tools that you have, someone is always going to have a better tool than you, someone is always going to have a lesser tool than you, not as many tools as you. It doesn't mean that you can't keep reaching out in both directions to help one another, but you are so important, you are so valuable, you have so much power within you to go after making the kind of music that you want to make, because of however and why ever that aligns to your why. My name is Beth, and if this is the first time we've met, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for listening or watching on YouTube, and make sure you're following us on all the socials. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. A special thanks to Maggie for all of her work, as well as for all of our other folks that have helped this year, in particular, interns and Sarah that's worked with us, our student workers from music service learning, and just so many other people. I've learned so much from you. I'm so grateful for you. And I hope that we can embrace 2021 together.